Oh, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Show on Wednesday, June the 12th, 2019. If you were here last night, we didn't have a Joe Chaffee weather show because, as it turned out, there was an outage with YouTube that started at around 5:30 and carried through yesterday evening. In fact, I had actually left my streaming software running, and then I got a message from Robert Brown to tell me that the screen just came up live on the Patreon page, so that's when I knew that it was working again. But that wasn't until I think sometime close to 9 o'clock last night, so it was too late for me to jump on and do a live stream. Nonetheless, we're here tonight. We've got stuff to cover. Also, just want to mention, for those of you who are on Patreon, if you missed it, I have added a chat feature using something called Throne, and I will be opening chat boards from time to time. We had it open this afternoon to test it out. Seemed to work pretty well. Still a couple of kinks I have to figure out, but just bear that in mind. If you see the message, if you see the post on Patreon that a chat's opened up, by all means jump in and participate. It's part of your Patreon membership, and it is private, so it's just the Patreon folks talking weather. And if you would like to be part of that platform, by the way, very easy to do. There's a link at the bottom of the descriptor to this live stream, or the descriptor to this video if you're watching, and it's just $2 a month, and you get involved with 240 plus other folks, and we do weather every day, 7 days a week, and you can message me at any time, and it's now even easier with the addition of the chat feature. Okay, let's get started with regards to where we're going tonight. We've got downpours developing in the Carolinas. They're moving up the East Coast. We've got some strong thunderstorms moving across the state of Florida on the southern end of a low that's developing along the North Carolina coast. We have a cold front swinging through the Midwest and the Great Lakes, and that's producing some thunderstorms. Oddly, though, we don't have really any widespread severe weather going on. All that's being indicated by the Storm Prediction Center are areas of marginal risk. Right now, one along the Carolina coast, a very small area in southeastern Florida. There was a pretty well-developed line earlier that moved through central Florida. There's not a whole lot left to it now. And then there's some other storms that have fired up further north. We also have a marginal risk with some what appear to be some strong cells along the Georgia-Alabama border running south-north into Tennessee. And you can see those two other small areas of marginal risk. Actually, when you look at it across the United States, including the marginal risk area that's showing up in Oregon, you have more, probably more of the geography that's not at risk for no thunderstorms today, as opposed to areas that are at risk. We haven't seen that in a while. So it just continues to show that at least the severe weather, what we had during the month of May and the very early part of this month of June, has definitely calmed down quite a bit. We should also point out, in terms of watches and warnings that are up, we don't have a whole lot happening from that standpoint. We actually have frost advisories, believe it or not, for the northeastern parts of Minnesota. But a small area of flood watches in South Carolina and southeastern Georgia. It looks like a couple of counties in Georgia there working some flash flood warnings at the moment. We have some flood advisories in the Central Rockies, and we also have excessive heat issues in parts of Arizona, Southern California, and even points further north in California. And we also have excessive heat and heat advisories up for parts of Northern California and on up along coastal Oregon. But much of the nation, when you look from the Rockies east, certainly, there really isn't much going on. And even from the standpoint of heat and humidity, there really isn't that much happening. So no early signs. I can remember, I think it was probably the summer of 1980, where the 90-degree highs started across the South in late May, early June, and then you had a string of days that I think in Dallas it must have went over 100 days in a row with temperatures of 100 degrees or higher, something like that. It's some really ridiculous number. And in contrast, at least so far, we really haven't seen anything unusual from the standpoint of heat. Part of the reason for that is probably the fact that we've had quite a bit of rain. It hasn't exactly been distributed evenly. It seldom is. But this is the 7-day rainfall forecast, which again is showing some excessive rainfalls of 5 inches plus in parts of northeastern Oklahoma and southwestern Missouri, an area that has already been hit hard from the rains from the severe weather of the last 4 weeks. But that area extends 3 to 5 inches running from Oklahoma east-northeastward through the middle Mississippi Valley and then through the Ohio Valley into western Pennsylvania. So I think this really reflects the frontal boundaries that are going to be setting up here. The one, of course, we've got the moving cold front that is going through that tonight, and for Thursday, we are going to see a frontal boundary set up there late in the weekend and for next week. So this takes us to next Wednesday evening. So I think the bulk of this may wind up coming after. Some of it's going to come early, but maybe more of it comes for the early part of next week. We also have several inches being indicated across eastern Pennsylvania and into the Catskills, and slightly lower amounts, but still every bit of 1.5 inches to 2 inches or more along the coast in New Jersey, down to Delaware, Maryland, and into southwestern New England. I think part of this is going to be coming from that wave that's going to be moving up the coast for tomorrow, and then early next week with the frontal boundaries that we are going to have to deal with. We have the Father's Day weekend, of course, and at least for my neck of the woods, I think it looks really good with no serious issues for Saturday and for much of the daytime on, if not all of the daytime part of Sunday. But we're going to get right to it. First off, at the moment, it's 7:10 Eastern Time. Still very, very nice here in my area. We're looking at dew points that are in the upper 40s and low 50s, and temperatures that are in the upper 60s to near 70. You look at the wind barbs, you'll notice they've all turned southeast, or as you go further south in New Jersey, more east, southeast, and east. So you're getting this flow off the ocean, and that certainly held temperatures down today. We have readings in the low 70s. Even down into Virginia, and now you get into the heavier overcast and you start to see the low 70s and even 60s being reflected back in areas in southern Virginia and in through North Carolina. With these plots on, you've got temperatures barely back to 70 in much of eastern North Carolina. The frontal boundary is just off the coast, and we're seeing low pressure that is developing and will be moving up to the northeast. And this cool air that came into the east has actually found its way all the way down through the southeast and into Georgia. These are temperatures this evening. We're talking readings mostly in the upper mid-60s to low 70s. I mean, that's pretty cool for this time of year, certainly. Obviously, it's coming with clouds, and it's also coming with some rain. The eastern satellite view, and we're going to start, I'll push it up further north, and you can see how nice and dry it still is. The high clouds are starting now to gain a bit of a foothold, but the first batch just sort of thinned out today. They really pulled out late this afternoon, and it went partly to mostly sunny up my way in southern areas of the Hudson Valley, but that's just temporary because now we're seeing more moisture pushing up to the north, and you get down into southern New Jersey and now into Maryland. Still some breaks in the cloud cover down in Maryland, but then you've got a heavier overcast in Virginia, and all of that cloud cover is streaming northeastward. And as we push the satellite loop further south, the cloud tops, the higher cloud tops that you can pick out here, of course, indicating the development of downpours and thunderstorms, and this is all going to be coming up the East Coast overnight. The wide satellite loop tonight really shows the atmosphere. It's so important to look. These GOES 16 images and the loops are so detailed. They really give you a very good view of what is working in the atmosphere. And we've often referred to those gears in the atmosphere, the upper lows that rotate around, and how you get disturbances that play into those gears. One rotates around the other, and the gears change in size and in magnitude. Well, you can kind of see that in play here. Watch the clouds down in the northern plains, moving from north to south, and then they bottom out and then turn southwest, and you get a southerly flow into the Great Lakes. So that's your upper low, that's your deep trough in the northern part of the jet stream that's digging southward, and then you have the bottom part of the jet with the tropical feed from the Gulf of Mexico, and those clouds are being pulled northeastward up the east side of the Appalachians. The mechanisms here are very obvious, and that's our weather that's coming up the coast for overnight and for tomorrow from the mid-Atlantic states overnight, and for the northern mid-Atlantic to New England for Thursday. And the radar getting busy here in the southeast. You've got some rather large areas of heavy rain and thunderstorms in southeast Georgia and into South Carolina, so that's where your flood watches are. You also have downpours just off the North Carolina coast, and then there's another batch of some overrunning precip back in western North Carolina and into Virginia, so that's moving northward. I'm going to be paying close attention to radar developments in eastern North Carolina, eastern Virginia, and on eastward, because that is what is going to be lifting northward. And it makes it a tough call tomorrow because of the structure of all of this. You have what appears to be several short waves in play. So how these short waves lift up in response to the deep trough to its northwest, you could wind up with a situation where you get, say, a band of heavy rain that moves through Maryland and in through eastern Pennsylvania, then perhaps a bit of lighter rain through New Jersey, and then it gets heavier again as you go from east of New York City to southern New England. And it could very well turn out to be something different if the short waves behave a bit differently, and the radar echoes will start to reflect that perhaps the heavier rain would be further west, perhaps the gap in between won't be as pronounced. But you can watch how the showers and storms off the southeast coast on the wide view here are reacting to the deep trough that is dropping down into the western Great Lakes. The rest of the country is very, very quiet, and you would expect that with as trough as deep as you have in the east. You're compensating that with a fairly strong ridge that is out in the west. And here it is how it looks on the upper air. That is a very deep trough for June 12th, running from western Lake Superior. Actually goes further north than that, but it extends all the way down into Louisiana. So a trough this far south actually drags a cold front pretty far south into the Gulf. And that trough, it's hard to pick out the southern short waves. They are embedded in here, but they're not nearly as well defined as what's going on with that whole northern part of that trough that starts to turn and lift later Thursday night into Friday. And this is going to bring in a shot of dry air into the east for Friday, and that high is going to go off the mid-Atlantic coast fast, and we're going to start a warm-up. The flow becomes westerly, the trough pulls up, and this is going to allow temperatures to warm up as we go through the weekend and into Sunday night, Monday. This is when you could have a first frontal boundary that's going to be weakening as it moves southeastward with some showers and thunderstorms. And then we're going to wait for this short wave to play through for later Monday night into early Tuesday. That'll bring perhaps a stronger front toward the east and another chance for showers and thunderstorms. So pretty active pattern here that we have with everything that's going on. So I'm gonna bring up the HRRR model. I'm gonna start wide, and then we'll go tight, a tighter view so we can break this down. And in the meantime, I'm also going to load, because I forgot to bring this up, but I want to bring up tonight's surface map so you can see what's happening here. Here's your wave that you're dealing with across the south. Low analyzed near Charleston, another low just southeast of Wilmington. You've got the warm front that extends from there, just sort of a stationary snaking frontal boundary, and that boundary runs across southern Louisiana. If you look closely, look at these dew points. The dew points in Louisiana, this is really unusual. Having lived in southeast Louisiana, because there's a certain point in late May, early June, where the humidity just kind of switches on and it really doesn't switch off until sometime maybe late September or October. Well, this is one of those instances where you actually have the frontal boundary that wound up so far south that you've got dew points not that far away from New Orleans in the 50s. And in central and northern Louisiana, even down in southwest Louisiana and southeast Texas, you've got a few spots here with dew points in the mid to upper 50s. That is very, very, that is dry air to make it that far south. And with the depth of that trough, there's another boundary that is running from North Texas on up northeastward into western Tennessee. And of course, this wraps up with low pressure that is sitting. You got one low west of Chicago, you got one low east of Chicago, the way they analyze it. But the northern trough system is basically creating the alleyway for the southern system to move northward up the coast. So let's watch the HRRR and how it plays out. I think what you're going to see are downpours and maybe a couple of embedded thunderstorms in the mix. You'll notice the HRRR takes one area out offshore, hugs another area that it starts to blossom. This is at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So you would expect to see it raining from Boston to about New York City, at least in the world of the HRRR. It's not quite into northernmost New Jersey, but it is in central and south Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, and into Maryland. I have to tell you, I'm not 100% sold at all on the radars looking this way, where you get one area of rain that runs out, looks like it wants to run out more northeast, and then you get a batch that develops north and west of the low center. I think you may wind up seeing the radar looking different, perhaps more of a solid look from west to east, and maybe a bit more beefed up than what the HRRR has. I just think the dynamics here are certainly workable for something a bit more robust than what this model's showing, particularly with what we're seeing on the satellite and radars tonight. And you also see that surface low that we talked about near Chicago, and how that just kind of meanders its way through Michigan, and the coastal low, there is a low there is a closed isobar, gets pulled up and lifted up to the northeast. It's almost as if what we're dealing with is a wave on a gigantic warm front that's lifting northward, and then we're going to have to wait for the cold front from the west, from the Michigan low, to come through late tomorrow into tomorrow evening. We only have out till 10 o'clock Thursday morning, where it's raining with some heavy downpours just about everywhere, from southeastern New England still all the way back almost to about the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. Rainfall amounts from this, I think you're going to see some spots that are going to wind up with an inch to an inch and a half. You're going to see some spots that are going to wind up with about a half an inch. There is going to be some variability to it because of where the heavy downpours line up. And I've been advising that folks that are having to deal with the morning commute might want to get a head start tomorrow by about 15 or 30 minutes just to buy yourself some time, because these downpours could really slow things up. And Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, this is at 9 a.m. So you're looking at it getting in. I think it gets in a little bit faster than this as well. So it is going to be impacting the rush hour. And then the other question is, well, what happens late in the day? Because now you got a cold front. This first area, it's all going to be done in most places either before noon as you go further south, or in the case of New York City, maybe at around noon or 1 o'clock. And you notice that the HRRR has an arced line of thunderstorms in central Pennsylvania tomorrow afternoon. Now, I don't know what's going to be left for this to work on as it moves eastward. There's not going to be a whole lot of daytime heating tomorrow. In fact, we've got an onshore flow with an east-southeast wind, so we may see a lot of areas have a tough time getting out of the 60s. So I don't know that you're going to have enough to work on, but it's certainly possible that you could see a shower or thunderstorm tomorrow evening. The HRRR does hold on to this, coming through it around between 8 and 10 o'clock. There's this, you see how that line just moves eastward? I think it's possible, so I left it in there. I wouldn't be totally shocked, if it winds up being very little out of this and it all just falls apart. But I thought it was a good idea to cover. And the other thing is to take a look at the NAM 3 kilometer, because that was actually pretty impressive, I thought. I don't know if did I look at the one from this afternoon, but here's the tighter view. Now here's where the NAM 3 just kind of brings up rain a bit faster. This is 5 a.m. It's actually slowed it down a little bit, but it does show some pretty hefty rains there and some thunderstorms in parts of Maryland and the southeastern PA. Starts to weaken a bit as it approaches New York City by 10 or 11 o'clock and then lifts on up toward the northeast. It's a fair representation, and there's your late afternoon line, which the 3 kilometer NAM minimizes it as it moves on to the east. So the bottom line is, I think in situations like this, one of my problems with the NAM, the 3 kilometer NAM, is sometimes it really overstates what's out there. So maybe this look might be a bit overstated with these east-west lines of what look like severe thunderstorms. It seems a bit overdone, but certainly there should be some heavy downpours here as this area moves on to the north. You'll notice that there's also going to be a streaky nature to the rainfall here. This is the NAM's forecast rainfall amounts. Actually, all the models have some idea of this, where you get these streaks of 2 inches plus, and then an inch or less on either side of that. And I think this is what you could wind up seeing. You could pull up every model today, and you're going to find a different look as far as the rainfall is concerned. The NAM 3, for example, emphasizes the heavy rains west of the New Jersey line. The NAM 12, it actually has more down south in Maryland, although it still has a higher streak, but it doesn't really show anything more than an inch to an inch and a quarter. The HRRR, which doesn't go quite out as far, but as far as we can take it, which is to noon tomorrow, has that streak more in New Jersey from the southwest corner up to about northeastern Monmouth County. But notice it doesn't have a whole lot of rain over New York City or Long Island or into southern New England yet at this point. It probably happens more after 10 o'clock. You get that last burst to put the rainfall amounts to bring them up to at least a half an inch, if not more. I just expect an inch, and it could go either side of that by at least half an inch. And is it possible somebody could wind up with 2? Sure. The other thing is to remember that this is it's a 4 to 6 hour window at most that we're talking about here, because after 12 or 1 o'clock, it's all done. Now let's go wide. We'll go back to the GFS and look at what we can expect for the weekend, because after this pulls out, you're going to have a pretty breezy, if not windy, day on Friday. With the low that's up in southeastern Canada, just northwest of Maine, and the high that's in North Carolina. So the gradient's pretty tight, so we'll probably have some nice gusty northwest winds to 20 to 30 miles an hour on Friday, with a mix of sun and clouds for most places. But that high quickly goes off the southeast coast, and suddenly your isobars are west, and by Saturday morning they are west-southwest. So that's going to start bringing temperatures up. There are showers and thunderstorms being indicated from Kansas northeastward into the Great Lakes. There is a frontal boundary that is running into the eastern lakes back to this low that's in western Iowa. But that low goes pretty far to the north, and the front with it is going to be weakening as it moves southeastward. So on Saturday, you'll probably have thunderstorms running east-west from Nebraska to western New York, across Michigan, maybe northwest Ohio and Indiana. And on Sunday, Father's Day, you still have a west-southwest flow. This is where it gets very warm. I see temperatures getting into the 80s on Saturday, and on Sunday it'll be in the 80s with some spots well into the 80s. And the sea breezes may only be right on the beaches themselves if you're headed for the shore, because that's a pretty decent gradient there with those isobars west-southwest. Perhaps the winds will be more southwest than anything else, but for the south-facing shorelines, that cuts down on how far inland the cooler ocean air gets. As far as thunderstorms, I think you're going to have to wait until Sunday night when that frontal boundary tries to make it through. GFS actually has a fairly bullish look for thunderstorms Sunday night into Monday morning. But again, this is weakening. The frontal boundary itself is weakening. And there's a stronger frontal boundary that comes up for Monday night. And this, I think, could produce some downpours and heavy thunderstorms before that goes out. And as far as next week is concerned, after Monday, that frontal boundary does push down into Virginia and North Carolina, at least in the world of the GFS, but there still might be some energy running along it. So we got to be a little bit careful for the latter part of next week, where it might wind up getting busy again, as with various threats of showers and thunderstorms later in the week. And now, of course, we're into the long range and into the following weekend, which, as you know, is always my version of Fantasyland. Okay, so one other thing I want to bring up is we'll go to the Hurricane Center's page, nhc.noaa.gov, and both on the Atlantic and the Pacific side, we really don't have much of anything going on. Tropical cyclone development is not expected, and if we I'll pull up the loop, the Atlantic wide view, and I mean, there's just really nothing here. You've got shear all over the place. Certainly, you do have some areas where you've got some showers and thunderstorms in the Southwest Caribbean, for example. But you also have some wind shear at work. If you look in the Caribbean, in the Northwest Caribbean, you can see the low clouds are moving east to west. The higher cloud tops are blowing west to east. That is no good for tropical cyclone development. If you look out in the Eastern Caribbean, out into the tropical Atlantic and the subtropical Atlantic, you've got this huge, all those high cloud tops are blowing from west to east. A lot of shear, and it is, of course, way too early for anything to come out of the tropical Atlantic, so we won't really pay too much attention there. The intertropical convergence zone, where you see all these clouds from off the African coast going westward, is still pretty far to the south. You get toward the latter part of July and August, and that area starts lifting much further north to about 10 degrees north, 15 degrees north. That's when you start to see those Cape Verde systems come off, and you see tropical cyclone development from that. But other than that, you're really not going to see very much. I just want to see, we can pull up a Pacific view and take a look at that. This is not the GOES shot. I'll have the GOES shot ready the next time. But there really isn't much happening out here in the Pacific. You've got the same issues with regards to shear going on, and I'm actually a little bit surprised. It would have usually the Pacific usually starts to get going in early June with something, but we're 12 days into the month, and there's nothing that the Hurricane Center is indicating to happen over the next five days. Okay, so let me just get rid of this. Come back over to the chat board. Before you know it, we're going to get into the heart of hurricane season, and we'll be busy here with these live streams, of course. So I'm happy enough that things are on the quiet side. Chuck, that is dust coming off. You see that with the dry, from the Sahara Desert, and you get these areas of Saharan dust that push off and go out to the west across the Atlantic. You see it happen almost every season, and of course that can impede tropical storm development. It gets involved in the circulations of some of these waves, and you wind up with systems not being able to get going because you've got too much Sahara dust out there. But that comes and goes. Yeah, Scott Briller, the chairman, it's unusual and yet it's not unusual. You do have years where it doesn't happen, but most years you do have something that pops up. Remember, their season starts 2 weeks before ours does. It starts in mid-May. I guess not to see it to me, there should have been at least one. But you know what will happen? Just like that, there'll suddenly be four. So, soon enough, it'll start to heat up. What is my opinion of the FV3 GFS upgrade? Matt M asks, and that's because the Weather Service went operational with the parallel GFS, and now it is the regular GFS. So if you go on Tropical Tidbits, the FV3 GFS option is no longer there. That's because it is now the operational GFS. I really have not looked at it. I was not using it very much at all in the last couple of months. After the winter time, I just kind of, I stopped using it and I stopped looking at it. I did peek at it a couple of times, but I'm just going to work with it and see how it goes. At least from the standpoint of now we've got it every day, so I'm going to have to get my feet wet and see how it handles things, and ask me that question in a couple of weeks, and we'll see how we'll see what it does between now and going into July. Anthony Orr, one of our resident statisticians, I should say, still 0 named storms in the East North Pacific, and no named storms are forecasted in the next 5 days. Only 4 seasons have had their first name storm after June 17th. Okay, so there it is. So the 12th, 5 days, assuming we don't get anything between now and the 17th of June, then it is going to be unusual. And also the fact that we have this El Nino working, that would tend to favor tropical cyclone development on the East Pacific side more than on the Atlantic side. So that, I think, adds another element to this mystery. Pamela Lee, people complain about our winter here, but they are so easy. I cycle, you're talking about biking. I saw that. I actually went on a nice 15-mile plus ride on Sunday, which was good, out east of me in Calverton. Not quite to Riverhead and not quite to the Twin Forks on the east end. Easier to get to with a lot less traffic, and it was the old Grumman facility that they turned into Grumman, the defense company, was very big on Long Island. It's no longer there, but they turned that whole facility into this giant park, and it's about a 12-mile or so trip all the way around. It's very, very nice. If you're on Long Island and you haven't done it, it's a nice place to go to. You can either bike it or walk it. But I had a lot of fun. I always enjoyed biking since I was a kid. I used to love going on long distance bike rides. Jason, I don't think, I was thinking about this today with regards to flood advisories and flood watches and warnings for southeastern New York and for New Jersey, eastern PA. I don't think we're going to see it, if only because of the fact that it's coming. It's only about 4 hours worth of rain, and unless you get something that really sits over some particular area tomorrow that gets pounded very quickly, I'm thinking that flooding concerns should be minimal. I've got my fingers crossed on that. You never know. You could wind up with one good cluster of a downpour, move over an area, and suddenly you get 2 inches of rain in about 45 minutes to an hour, and you've got some flooding issues. I don't expect them to do that, to put a flood watch up, which means that if something does happen, you're certainly going to see the flood warnings fly. Just checking, moving up. Alfred Phillips up in Wainwright, Alaska, enjoying his summer. Some of my colleagues that I work with are on a trip right now in Alaska, and they are having the time of their lives. First time up there for all of them. Just absolutely astounded by the beauty of the great state of Alaska, and it is on my list of places to go. Okay, William, do I go strawberry picking? I've got apple picking. I've got strawberry picking years ago. I haven't done it in a long, long time. A lot of the apple farms on Long Island have disappeared. The ones that are left have become gigantic tourist traps where you pay a ton to do it, and I just won't do that anymore. There was a, I think I'm trying to remember. I think it was off Edwards Avenue, or maybe it was a little bit further east from there. That I used to take my kids every year. We used to go apple picking, and it got more expensive. Then we didn't do it for a bunch of years because my daughters got older. And then I went out. I hadn't been out to that part of the East End in a long, long time. And when I went out there, I hardly recognized it because the old farms were gone. A lot of the old farms were gone and replaced with 55 and over communities, and the traffic on the weekends on the North Fork. It used to be a really nice, well-kept secret. Now they put all these vineyards there, so everybody goes out on the weekends and pays huge amounts of money to sit and drink wine all day and hear concerts. It's not for me. I just don't like to fight all that stuff. I don't have the patience at all. I'll wait till the off season. When it's the off season or during the week, I will go out there and do what I got and have a good time, basically. All right, gonna say wrap it up at this point. Haven't done this in a while, but we mentioned it at the beginning. If you would like to be part of a more intensive weather experience, just put a link up to my weather platform on Patreon. I think most of the folks that are on the chat tonight are all Patreon members, so I'm preaching to the choir. But just in case you're not, the link is up there. And there's also a link on the descriptor to this live stream. If you're watching this on a replay, descriptor to this video. And it's just $2 a month. And you could become part of a growing group of 240 plus folks that just like to eat, sleep, and breathe weather 24/7. So do consider it. It's just $2 a month. And we do a lot of stuff on there. And now we've added this chat feature. So I think that will work well. Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight. If both of us aren't too tired, we'll be doing that on Facebook. I'll upload it to YouTube once it's over with. Tomorrow we will have our usual weather in 5 days in 5 minutes. We'll be doing it tomorrow morning, right when all the rain is coming through, and we'll update you on that and the prospects for the weekend. And of course tomorrow night our regular live stream, figuring probably at about 7 o'clock Eastern time. Thanks for being here, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. Have a great night. We'll either see you later or we'll see you tomorrow.